Love Where You Live is brought to you by Live, Love Local Michigan, the online and print magazine celebrating Michigan through amazing adventures, stunning photography, high-profile content, and more. Subscribe to our monthly print magazine for exclusive content you won't find on our free online magazine. With your subscription, you also receive automatic entry into our monthly subscriber Spend Local Michigan and surprise pop-up giveaways with prizes so magical, you'll think you found a pot of gold at the end of a Michigan rainbow. Subscribe online at livelovelocalmi.com. This podcast is a follow-up to our previous podcast regarding the hijacking of Ottawa County. If you remember from that podcast, this past May, Ottawa County's Board of Commissioners decided to disregard the desires of a majority of Ottawa County residents and voted Ottawa County as a quote-unquote constitutional county. In essence, this means, at least they believe that it means, that it appoints their small group of right-wing extremists as the kings and queens of Ottawa County and allows them to rule as dictators. If you also remember from that podcast, a majority of these commissioners were newly elected this past November with the backing of the extreme right-wing group Ottawa Impact, which is part of Michigan Impact. They believe that they and they alone determine what is constitutional and can choose to ignore laws at will. I reiterate, it is what they believe. And this belief has led them to violate several state laws that govern public health in the state of Michigan, on top of running roughshod over everyone else's freedoms, as we discussed in the first podcast. Their latest fight, which has actually been ongoing since their very first meeting as commissioners way back on January 3rd, when they went rogue right out of the gate. They have been actively trying to oust the public health officer of Ottawa County, Adeline Hambley, and appoint their own personal crony to the position, a one Nathaniel Kelly. In this podcast, we unpack the past 10 months, what got us here, and how the current Board of Commissioners are truly unqualified and unschooled when it comes to their own positions and its limitations. Today, we're talking with Marcia Mansoray. Marcia is the Deputy Health Officer for the Ottawa County Public Health Department. Welcome, Marcia.
Thank you for having me, Tamara.
So, Marcia, I'd like to start out with you giving a little bit of background on what your role is, since we couldn't have Health Officer Hambley on here today due to litigation. Tell us a little bit more about your background and qualifications to have this conversation with me tonight.
So, as you said, I'm the Deputy Health Officer for the Ottawa County Department of Public Health. I'm also a resident of Ottawa County. And, before I tell you more about me, I want everyone to know who's listening that I'm doing this on my own time, and that what I say in our conversation may not reflect the opinions of Ottawa County. So I think to get said right up front.
Yes, absolutely. And as being a resident of Ottawa County as well, your voice is speaking in that respect, in that regard today as well.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to start out with, if you could explain to us why the Ottawa County Commissioners, led by Chairman Joe Moss, or Chairperson Joe Moss, wants to remove Officer Hambley from being the health officer of the Public Health Department. What has led up to this point?
I think that Adeline Hambley is not so much a target personally. I don't think it's a personal vendetta they have against her, or at least it didn't start that way. It may have become something more like that now, as we've had 9 and we're into the month 10 since they took office. I think this really goes back. Joe Moss is a large instigator here. There are others. Maybe Sylvia Rohde has some personal positions so that she doesn't agree with the health department. But for Chairperson Moss, Joe Moss, it really goes back to COVID-19 and goes back to 2020. Where his school was involved with us. And then again in 2021, when the governor of Michigan and then the health department, Michigan Health Department, MDHHS, stopped issuing orders in the state of Michigan. That was an inflection point for sure during the COVID-19 pandemic. We were in the early summer of 2021. And as anyone knows who lived through that, there was a lot yet to come. Delta was yet to come, Omicron was yet to come, and then we really saw our hospitals in the winter of 21 and in early 22 get completely overrun, just everywhere, not just in our big cities, but all over the place with all the illness that came from that. So there was a mask order that was initiated locally because there weren't state orders anymore. And when you're in a pandemic, it makes a lot more sense, especially a global one, to have a unified front in a larger geographic area. So national approach would have made more sense since everyone in the nation was dealing with this. Certainly a state approach makes more sense than 45 health departments having 45 approaches, even though they're trained similarly and they have the same kind of understanding and thinking and roles and responsibilities. There are different ways to do this depending on your community, and that might be the positive, having a community specific slant. But that's where we were at. And we saw things, we saw Delta coming, we saw it happening in the South, down in Florida and Georgia, and we saw children being impacted really for the first time. We were seeing large increases in cases among children, and then we started seeing increases in hospitalizations, and then increases in deaths. And that's really, really concerning. And that's situational awareness. That's really important information for us. So even though we weren't seeing that in Ottawa County, Michigan, on the west side there by Lake Michigan, the fact that it was happening meant that it could happen, easily happen. And we saw that before in the pandemic, waves going across geographies, going from one place next to the other. And so we had vaccines, but we didn't have vaccines for 11 and under. School was starting. We know that we'll be closer together as school starts. We know our weather will get colder, which means that we'll go inside. In the South, that's more like their summertime, right? So they're in air conditioning. So it made sense that we would see this move north, as we have experienced with other communicable diseases. And so we were watching data, we were tracking what was coming in, and we felt like we needed to put in place an order of some kind. And timing was something we were considering very carefully. We're always thinking about three things when we're considering an order, like, can I do this? Do I even have the authority to do this? Should I and must I? And weighing those and I guess documenting our thought process on that. And for us, it became evident that we needed to, at minimum, do a mask order for grade 6 and under. For the staff, there's vulnerable staff, there's vulnerable children. Their parents do not have a choice to vaccinate them. So the order had an automatic expiration date. It would be 60 days following the vaccine becoming available. We thought they probably would need more than one dose. We know it takes a couple weeks after that dose in order to be considered fully vaccinated. So we thought 60 days would give parents time, and there'd be time for those kids to respond positively, their immune systems, to that vaccine. So that was one. We felt it was a logical, reasonable, limited mandate. It could expire if cases got lower. It could expire at the authority of the health officer if the health officer decided we don't need this anymore. So it had several escape clauses that everyone could see right up front. And then we felt while there were still things that could be done, parents would have been able to make a decision, and they would have opted into vaccine or not. And then they could choose whether their children should continue to wear masks, whether their children should be in school or not be in school. We felt that they had enough choices available to them at that point. And we were starting to have antivirals and lots of other therapies available too. So it seemed like a logical thing, and something that I don't think everyone understands. And honestly, an almost 18-year public health professional, I don't think I fully understood the gravity of responsibility that is on the shoulders of a local health officer in Michigan. Now, not all states function this way, but most function similarly to Michigan. There is only one person in your county or in your health jurisdiction. If you have a rural area, there might be multiple counties joined together. that can issue orders in the event of a public health emergency, something like COVID-19. The sheriff can't do anything. The chief of police can't do anything. The mayor can't do anything. The commissioners can't do anything. Doctors can't do anything. Like, no one can do anything about something that can affect the population without their consent. So a communicable disease is like that. You don't consent to getting that usually. You get infected, you don't know, it's easy to pass, and you didn't have a choice in the matter. That's COVID-19.
That was
Right? That was
COVID-19, yeah.
COVID-19. And so there is this one person that can implement, that has unique information and that has unique duties and responsibilities. And
that's the key. That's the key right
that
there.
is the key.
The responsibility.
Yeah.
She had an absolute
Yes.
responsibility to protect public
Right.
health.
So she had a choice to make, right? And not doing anything is a choice. And it's part of that responsibility. So if people are harmed, if it's clear later, right, hindsight, that people were harmed because she didn't do anything, she is responsible for that.
And they would have come for her.
And if people are harmed because of what she did do, same there. So, and I'm standing there with her, honestly, right? And it's a different health officer. It's not Adeline Hambley. It's a person who had been in that department for over 30 years and a health officer for 17 of those 30 years. Very connected to the community, very knowledgeable about the community, very knowledgeable about public health, in a person of high ethics and integrity who cared deeply about her community, lived there. All these people are her neighbors, her family, her friends. They mean something to her. She goes to the grocery store they go to, the gas station they fill up their car at. So, we had these conversations together, knowing that if something happened to her, then I would be the one that would be left to make those decisions. When an order is put in place, it can't be removed except the health officer removing it. No one can remove it. Yes, right. So, what you're doing is probably like presidents have these thoughts. I imagine, majors and generals and captains and armies have these thoughts. Can I live with this decision that I'm about to make? And you look at the different options you have. As I live the rest of my life, can I live with being that kind of person? Can I live with that decision? And
it's the difference between not doing any harm by wearing a mask to not wearing a mask and potentially passing the virus on to somebody and it takes their life.
Exactly. And neither one of us.
It's a simple decision.
Neither one of us could live.
It's a simple decision to me.
I couldn't not do something and live knowing that people might have died because of that. And now I know one surgical mask on one person doesn't have a big impact. We made sure that all schools had enough masks so that every child could get a new mask at school every day if they needed that, a surgical mask. And so, we try to take as many measures as possible to make this doable, to have it function well, lower any barriers, the bar for, that would make it difficult to implement. But it was clear to me, and it was clear to her individually, I didn't think I could live with a clear conscience doing nothing. And I know that when you have everyone with a mask on, the effectiveness is very, very high. And I know people are going home, they're taking their mask off, they're going out to stores and doing all kinds of things. And some are very protective and others are not. And they're living different lifestyles. So we need to factor all that in. And that is also part of that. Like, how can we make school a safe place to be? Because we believe it was very, very important for students to be in school. Like, they'd had enough, they'd missed enough. This was hard on all of them, hard on everyone. Wearing a mask does add to that. I mean, it does. You're young, it's hard to understand each other, it's hard to see lips moving to help comprehend. Like, I understand that. But that's a smaller negative than hospitalization, than death. Mortality was very low, thankfully, in that population. We had only one child die, and only is a really heartless thing for me to say, because it wasn't only.
But a child
Yeah,
died.
a child died.
A child
Many
died.
children were in the hospital. Many children got MISC. I know as a public health professional that viruses can cause ongoing things later in life. We know from chickenpox you can get shingles, right? There are things that can happen that can lead to ongoing disabilities or health concerns throughout your lifetime. And we didn't know if COVID would do that or if COVID wouldn't do that. But it's doing that. And that's one of the things, that was one of the very first things we thought about. We're not concerned just about hospitalization, infection, and death. We're concerned about what, if you're infected, what that virus might do later on or long term. That's something we have to factor. And that's going to be an economic impact, a social impact, a health impact, a public health impact on our community long term. So getting an infection or preventing it is super important because of that one factor alone. Just like having a chickenpox vaccine gives you a good chance of never having shingles. We're still figuring that out because shingles happens a long time after. But
Well, it seems to me that you all crossed your T's and dotted your I's, and you did your job at the highest level possible.
we did,
And they're not easy decisions.
and we communicated. But that is when a segment of our population got just really freaked out, and I think there's a lot of fear. So there was fear about COVID-19, and then some people,
there was fear of the government.
Fear of the government.
The government was trying to eradicate the population.
Fear of control, fear of all kinds of things. We were in our houses. We were separated from one another. It's easy to get lost into the, interwebs of the internet and social media,
easy.
There's isolation. I don't know all the reasons, but fear of the government became another fear. Fear of your local health officials became another fear. Not believing that they actually do care about you. Suspecting that because it's happened. I mean, we all know history. We've gone to school. We've learned the things that have happened in the past. People can turn into tyrants. They've done horrible things. They've murdered whole populations. There's genocide. I mean, there's all kinds of bad things that can happen. So it's not, completely illogical for someone to say, well, this health officer could do that too. They're grabbing their opportunity at power, and they're never going to give it back. It'll be with us forever after that. Just watch, and hopefully now they can say, oh, and reflect on that. Our health officer dropped that exactly when they said they would, and they've never picked that power back up again. They're just doing their job. So did our governor, so did the head of our state health department. They all let that go. And that is the proper exercise of that. Now, if we had not let that go, there are...
invent a different story.
Yeah, invent a different story, take some different measures, and, use the law that you have. But we don't have that story. But we still do have a world that is recovering from COVID-19 in a lot of ways. There's a lot of polarization.
It's still affecting people.
It absolutely is.
Still to this day.
Yeah.
So then comes along Michigan Impact and Ottawa Impact.
Yeah, in the spring of
out of this
22.
fear, grasping onto this fear that people were carrying and expressing that fear outwardly and projecting it on people. And now they are trying to eliminate that which helped the community and may have saved lives. Most likely did save lives. I think it's safe to say you all did save lives.
Thank you.
Considering that a child and others, died in the community there. So I don't want to get back. I don't want to get into the whole election process with this, but they all took office in January of this year, correct? And since then, it seems, it's important to note though, that yesterday, attorney, I'm going to make sure I say her name correctly. Sarah Riley Howard she released that document yesterday on their website explaining, because you guys had a court case today, right? It was an appeal case. So she released just yesterday, which was October 10th, that document on the website for Pinsky Smith.
.com. Yep, pinskysmith.com.
And so reading through that, it seems to me that Joe Moss and the Board of Commissioners, led by him, want to operate without impunity. And they literally, to me, they literally have ruled themselves kings and queens of Ottawa County, and what we say goes. And they don't even care about the legal or ethical ramifications of anything that they're doing. That is my impression reading through this, because this informed me in ways that I haven't been informed just doing the research on them and paying attention to what's been going on, even since the last podcast that we did on them. So what are the specific charges that Joe Moss filed against removing? Basically, I think they want to eradicate the public health department completely. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, I mean, they ran on, and they expect the whole community to know. If you were following them, you might know that they wanted to remove the health officer, which was not Adeline Hambley, but a previous one, and kind of defund the health department, I guess, like get the health department back under control. That it was not really clear what that meant exactly. But as we just went through, we just began a new fiscal year, October 1. And so we submitted budgets back in May and reviewed them with the new county administrator in June, and then didn't hear anything for a while until August, when that got presented to this board, to the finance committee. And
your budget, I'll make sure that I have this correct. It was $6.8 million, and they wanted to cut it to $2.5 million.
That was the second proposal. Yes.
That was the second. So what was the first?
The first proposal was interesting. It was COVID is over, so we need to right size the department back down to pre-COVID, and so provide a budget scenario that is consistent with 2019 numbers, and adjust those as needed. So we said, okay, 2019 was before COVID-19. That's, that was their point. It's before COVID-19, but it was also before the inflation that has come during that period of time. And it's 4 years ago, and we're in the fastest growing county in Michigan. So there's more people. So we took 2019 and we looked at the consumer price index, took the budget that was allocated from the county for operations and increased it for inflation, and then added the population growth, which was a small amount, it was about 4%, and added that in, and we came to a number that was about $450,000 less than what we had asked for from the county. And so we just basically put that in there and said, this is how we got this number. It meets with what you were asking for. It's less than we need. We came in with a number that was flat with 23 in an inflationary time, when wages and salaries are increasing. And so we didn't go up at all. We kept positions vacant in order to not increase the budget. We didn't rehire things. We trimmed out things to come in flat with no increase. And so we said, trimming another $400,000 or $500,000 will not be easy, but we will work with you on this, if this is what you feel like you need. So there we were. And so we didn't get into the nitty gritty details, but we saw that number and we felt like, okay, we can work on things. We could maybe get some grants, or we'll find a way to make this work. And then the next thing that came out was, okay, $2.5 million, and that was talked about at a committee meeting. They threw out so many different numbers. It was lots and lots. 5% was a number.
Where did they pull just $2.5 million out of?
No idea.
What's the justification for that number?
No idea. They said they were averaging a bunch of years together, except that, I mean, I can go back to 1993, and I think we got about that and that in 1993. So I mean, so I don't. It's a low number. It's a very low number to come from the county, and and so they came in with that number, and Administrator Gibbs sent that by an email. Create a budget scenario with $2.5 million from the county instead of 6.8.
And he gave her like 24 or
48
hours to cut $4 million
48
from
hours.
the budget.
So, she and I are meeting with our finance manager. We're talking to some of our department directors within our health department. And we emailed back that by the end of the day, like, these are the problems that we see with this. And we do not believe that this is a scenario that can be worked with in any way. So we believe that it will break laws, that we will not be able to have mandated services that are required by law. It doesn't look like a workable amount of money compared to the first scenario that you gave us and compared to what we submitted to you. What we submitted to you, we know we can meet all laws and provide the services that the community expects. So that next morning, so now we only have 24 hours. We gotta thank you very much for your feedback. Please stick with the $2.5 million as close as possible and send a budget scenario in. So we're like, okay,
not possible.
This is not possible.
As close as possible is not possible,
right? So we started looking more nitty gritty, and there's just, it's so complicated. It's complicated to do a budget for a large organization, period. But being a government organization, there's a lot of laws and mandates. There's so many that you have to look through. And there are local laws, there's state laws, there's just so much. So one thing that we knew, though, there was just a couple really clear things. We have to pay back to the county. When they give us money every year for a budget, we have to give them money back. And that money we kind of call indirect charges for central services. So the county provides us things, right? As a health department, they're providing IT services and equipment. They're providing fiscal support. They're providing human resources support, hiring, and all that sort of thing. They have corporation counsel, so legal support. So there's a bunch of services, facilities. Our building is being maintained by the county. So each of those departments has a formula for how they charge the front-facing or the customer service departments. We're a front-facing department, and they're internal departments providing service to us so we can provide it to our constituents and residents. We knew that charge would be $1.66 million that we would need to give back of the $2.5 million. So that left us.
We'd be operating on $900,000.
Right. And then we knew that $250,000 of that $900,000 was restricted to one program in our department, and we couldn't use that. That had to go to that program alone. So that left us with about $550,000, $650,000, period, for an entire. We have other money coming in, but that amount of money given by your local governing entity who is mandated to provide a health department, that is not enough money to show that they are contributing to the health and safety of their community through the health department. It is an illegal level of money. So
it is a joke.
Yes.
I will say that flat out.
So that breaks the law.
Insulting.
Yeah.
How insulting.
So once we got to that number, we went, this is a non-starter. Like, we broke every law there is. We don't have match for grants. The state of Michigan is not going to give us any funding, plus the federal money that flows through them. We're not going to get any of that. All of the grants we got, we don't get any of those. And they broke the law because there's a minimum amount that's expected from your county government to support this effort. And they were like I'm trying to think here now, hang on, about a quarter of that minimum amount, so about 25% of that.
So with deeming themselves a constitutional county, with what that even means,
right.
They're basically, they don't care about law. They don't care about any laws. So essentially they're saying, based on their own logic and their own words, that these are laws, these are state laws, but we don't deem them constitutional, essentially. So they're not really laws.
Not laws that we care about.
I mean, I think that's fair. Is that fair to say?
Well, it may be laws they don't know about. I mean, there's a lack.
They don't agree with them,
Yes.
because it's even about what is truly law. It's whether or not they agree if it should be a law.
And there's a lack
Then
of deference to expertise.
Oh my gosh, it's blatant.
Yes.
It's blatant.
And now, they're charging this health officer for misconduct, negligence, and incompetence in her handling of the budget situation.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because those are the specific words that he filed, correct?
Hmm?
Joe Moss filed these charges. And it's important to note also that he filed these charges without, by law, holding a
Well, he
hearing.
scheduled a hearing for October 19, but neither he nor his counsel, not his counsel, the county's counsel, were aware of the laws governing county commissioners.
You'd think that's something that they might want to learn as a county commissioner. You think that would be the first thing that they would learn as a county commissioner? What are the laws that we must follow? So
they read their own board bylaws, which allowed for this, which is not legal, and they weren't aware of and broke Section 4610 of the Michigan compiled laws, which says if you are going to hold a special meeting, that needs to be initiated by the vote or approval or request of at least a third of the Board of Commissioners. None of them that we know of had any say or any idea about this notice for a hearing for the removal of the officer that came out during a 7-hour meeting when the budget was being finally approved by the board, the budget for all departments in the county, including the health department, on September 26th. So at 11:10 p.m., Adeline Hambley's counsel got an email with that notice. So, yeah. And then it included an offer for a settlement if they could come to agreement to go their separate ways. And the response was
for her to leave the position.
Yes, we each go our separate ways. So she is not amenable to anything that would remove her from her duty and her position. And who would her replacement have been? Did they have somebody that they were going to appoint? I'm not sure the process of appointing a public health officer for a county. Can you explain what that process is? Yeah, there are rules about that. There are criteria for the qualifications that a health officer has to meet in order to be appointed. And so they usually walk through those. There are 3 separate steps, kind of combinations of education and experience. But they all are alike, all of the criteria, in that it requires public health administrative experience, depending on your degree and your time and of public health experience, administrative experience, etc. And then the county board of commissioners goes usually through an open hiring process. They post a position. They can have an interim if they need to, but in our case, the current health officer gave us a good sized notice, like a 6-month notice, a little bit more than 6 months, on a retirement. So there would be plenty of time after a contentious global pandemic to find a suitable candidate for a job that is a lot harder than it used to be. And not as many people are going to want it. So it was a nationwide search for that. They had multiple candidates. So they went, you're supposed to go through that. That's a normal government, transparent hiring process. Then once they have that, sometimes there are open interviews, like open to the public. There's multiple people involved in the interview, including human resources, so that things are done properly. And usually more than one interview as you narrow things down. There weren't a lot of candidates that applied. There were a few, I believe, that were qualified. One of them was Adeline Hambley. who became our current health officer. Once they make a selection, and the county administrator is usually at the table with that, and presents to the board who they believe is the most qualified candidate and summarizes their experience and what they learned about them in the interview, why they think that they would be really suitable. In Adeline's case, she had been a long-term director of the Environmental Health Department, which involves a lot of regulatory and enforcement actions. And she had really revolutionized that department by bringing in a different perspective, a different philosophy for how to operate. And that philosophy was the philosophy of the health department in general. And she was able to implement it in that department, which meant that the health department is a partner with the business, or they're a partner with a community member. So if you're a restaurant, we partner with you for your success, because your success means the success of our community. If you're serving healthy food, you're going to be successful economically. That's good for the community, and they don't get sick, right? And so if we can work together and educate one another and be open and transparent and honest and ask questions, we're not here to try to harm you. We're not here to shut you down. We're here to make sure that you can have a thriving business that doesn't make people sick, and so you don't end up in a lawsuit because someone died eating at your restaurant, right? So she never would use an order or a cease and desist action, or any kind of hammer as the first step. It's always, well, let's talk. We got a complaint. We want to let you know that we got a complaint. Can you tell us more about this? Because it's important for you to know that somebody complained about your restaurant. You might want to just, have information regarding your customer service, but also is there anything you can tell us about that date? Did anything happen at the restaurant? Was there anything unusual? Were your freezers and refrigerators working? All that kind of stuff. So it's a really good thing, and they liked that about her. Okay, she's not heavy-handed. She's not high on regulation. She uses it when it's necessary and not when it's not, right? Let's use education. Let's use partnership. Let's help walk people through. And even if, I'll stop there. But so they liked that. And the board decided to bring that to a meeting and to have a resolution to vote on to appoint her as the health officer. And that just requires a majority of the board. They did that in December, and she was unanimously voted on by all 11 members of the Board of Commissioners. So that's a necessary step. She also accepted, that appointment prior to their vote. They asked, has anyone talked with Adeline? Is she amenable to being the health officer? Would she accept an appointment? And that was a yes. They'd had that conversation. The next step is to send all of that information. So transcripts from college, resume, all the experience of this person to the state of Michigan, because they have oversight. We are partially an arm of the state of Michigan because they have the same responsibilities that we do in our jurisdiction over the whole state. And so they need to review this appointee and see if they're willing to approve them to be the health officer. And so that process was engaged in. The state issued their approval quickly, and then a background check is done to make sure there's nothing unusual found there, and that is done. So that's the whole process. A health officer, a local health officer, is not an at-will employee. The state health officer is. The state health officer works at the pleasure of the governor, and can change or not change as governors change. Locally, this is more like a Supreme Court judge kind of appointment. Like, this is a lifetime appointment that you exit at your choice or under certain limited conditions that look like you are not able to function in your role anymore.
Thus the lawsuit to remove her.
Right. So when they took over in January, they did a bunch of things on the very first day, which is January 3. And one of them, they intended to fire the health officer and put in their replacement and appoint them, which they did all of those things that day, except that one commissioner said, well, which health officer are you talking about, the former health officer or the new health officer?
And who had just been elected,
appointed, and approved, been on the job for 2 weeks, hadn't done anything, and so they were confused. They didn't know. It seemed like they didn't know. I don't know. They acted very confused. And so then it was sort of like, uh-oh, what are we going to do? And so they backtracked and demoted her to an interim health officer, which is not something that they can legally do either. There has to be a hearing. There has to be cause. There has to be evidence. It has to be presented.
Thank goodness for those laws.
Yes. Yeah, they're protective of the community and protective of the health officer. Protective of the county, too. If you have a health officer that's sexually harassing employees, you need to have a way to get rid of them, right? So, and also, if you have a board of commissioners that likes a different person more than they like the one that's there needs to have protection from that, not a logical action and not a cause for removing them.
Who was this person that they appointed?
Yeah, so this person was there in the room with a suit on, ready with a speech. And so they appointed a man by the name of Nathaniel Kelly, and his wife is active in activism around. How can I say this tactfully? She's an industrial hygienist. So industrial hygienists monitor and help to ensure that workplaces are safe for people working in them. So that you're not exposed to toxic chemicals, bad air, things to your skin, so that you're protected from harm to your head, to your eyes, to your ears, to your feet, all those sorts of things, so that you expect reasonable protections as an employee in exchange for your work. Very important job. She was trained in that in her time in the military and eventually got a degree after leaving the military. But during COVID-19 and prior to COVID-19 had scientific opinions that did not align with the majority of scientists or doctors in the United States or the world. But some believe the same as she did. And so we knew of her by the time this year began, because she had interactions with our department, had filed some complaints, had reached out to schools to give them what she believed was better information, complain about what they were doing, complain about what we were doing as a health department. And there was one incidental run-in that she and I had that we didn't intend to have. A media outlet asked me. I was the spokesperson during COVID-19 for most things, so kind of was the face along with our communication specialist. And so I did interviews every day, all day long. And I got asked if I would do an interview with a national outlet who said, there's someone in your community that lives in your community who has differing views than you're giving on masking. Would you be willing to talk to us? And I said, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't know the name of this person or who this person was. But they stated some of the opinions, and one was that masks were harmful to people, harmful to our health, and not helpful. So definitely not helpful in preventing COVID-19, and harmful in giving a false sense of security, and harmful for children, and harmful for people to wear. And they wanted to know my response, and my response was, well, I think that people who have education in science and medicine need to be really, really careful with how they use their influence and their education and how they advise people, because it's a big responsibility if people listen to something you're saying and it's not correct. And so I would just caution that person, whoever they are, to thoroughly research something and talk to people before they make any proclamations that could really harm a community, right? If they're giving the wrong information and people listen to it and follow it, and we have deaths or hospitalizations or infections as a result. And so my name was in the article and it became a personal vendetta by the wife of this person. And so filed a defamation lawsuit, didn't sue me, but sued everyone else who gave comment in the article. And it was kind of dismissed by the court, and never heard. Um, but so there's sort of a thing, that so they want Marcia Mansouri gone. Joe Moss wants Marcia Mansouri gone. This man, I don't know what he thinks, but he did give a nice speech. I didn't agree with it. Thought we should give neti pots and vitamin D and things to every house in Ottawa County. I'm not sure how he's going to finance that or make sure that those were used properly. And ivermectin prescriptions is anti-vax generally, from what I can tell. So it's an interesting choice, but they were there in the room waiting, and there was a vote, and they were appointed health officer that day. But nothing was ever sent to the state of Michigan until the day after this notice for a hearing for the removal of the officer, meaning the health officer. It's a formal title for that.
And how many days was he appointed for, and Officer Hambley was put as the interim?
He was appointed on January 3, the same day she was removed. So we never saw an open application, where people could, or open posting, a job posting, where human resources would be involved in properly receiving applications and selecting candidates and things like that, which you would want to do. One of their tenets is that they are transparent by default. So that was the first clue that day, that all these people that they fired, excepting Adeline Hambley, who was only demoted, but without cause, and had replacements for them, like standing in the wings, all things that were not on the meeting agenda, all things that the people of Ottawa County had no voice in, other than they had elected them mostly in the primary. So 7 of them got their seats in the primary. There was no person running, opposing them in November. So 7 of them.
So they just automatically got
in. Right? So this is a super huge learning curve for me, because you say, you started our conversation before we started recording with you've been actively involved in politics and educating yourself. I really wasn't. I loved my job.
It's not uncommon, honestly. Before Trump, I think there was so much apathy in politics. My entire life, I've been active in politics. But after COVID as well, we've had some pretty significant things happen in the past 8 years that has it's turned things upside down, is what it's done.
Yeah.
Maybe we needed it. There's a part of me that thinks we needed to be shaken up a little. Mm-hmm. But the damage that has been done, a lot of it is irreversible. And especially with COVID, a lot of people died.
Yeah.
A lot of children died. And people don't want to look at those statistics. And I understand the fear with vaccinations, and I understand the fear with pharma, with big pharma. Mm-hmm. I understand the fear with insurance companies and healthcare in this country. We have a lot of problems that we need to fix in those areas. But what is happening in Ottawa County, I think, is just, it's a perfect example of how the cognitive dissonance that is really going on in this country. I think Ottawa County is the poster child for this.
That is a new term that I learned during this, cognitive dissonance. Like, you come up with a fact that doesn't fit with your worldview.
No, it's not based on education. Yeah. It's based on opinion.
Yeah.
It's not based on facts. It's not based on consensus. And that's what science is.
Absolutely.
Science is consensus. There's a lot of people that do a lot of things in peer review in order to say, yeah, this is done right. This is what works. You're always going to have conspiracy theorists, though. Mm. But when those conspiracies start to do real harm to real people, and you have the effect of what's happening in Ottawa County, and these commissioners who are just trying to act without impunity, like, they're disregarding every law that exists, thinking they are above it, and then they get to dictate what those laws are. And then they're telling the rest of us, well, I don't have to wear a mask, but if you died, too bad.
They came in doing it in the name of Jesus on top of that. And so, my first thought was, okay, so this Jesus guy supposedly was willing to suspend his rights and life for the sake of others. So this seems like a perfect time, COVID-19, to apply that. I am willingly giving up some of my rights for the benefit of my neighbor.
And I don't even look at it as a right. We didn't lose rights. It was an inconvenience. Did I like wearing a mask? Absolutely not. I hated it. I was living in a very hot state at the time of COVID, and having that on when it's 110 outside was not comfortable, or going into a store with that on. It was not comfortable at all. It was an inconvenience. It didn't take my rights away. I understood the responsibility that I had to the people around me to not get them sick.
Right. And that's
to do everything within my power to not get them sick, because I can't ultimately control that, but I can help mitigate that. And if I can help mitigate that, I'm going to do that, because I don't want millions of people dropping dead. I don't want that to happen to people.
Right. And we needed to just buy enough time until we had suitable medications, preventive things, pharmaceutical ways of prevention, like a vaccine. And it was incredibly fast that we got really great tools. And,
because we've been working on things for 20 years, 20 plus.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, and that's the thing with the scare with vaccines is, oh my God, this came out overnight. It's experimentation. And no,
it was 3 decades of research in that platform and using those messenger RNA type vaccines. I mean, there was 30 years of research in that. So those years had been put in and I'm grateful.
So since the commissioners have discovered the law that they cannot just appoint a public health officer, what has been the process since then? I mean, obviously they're trying to get her ousted completely now, and they're filing court cases saying she's incompetent, which I don't understand where they think they're ever going to win an argument like that. I mean, the document that that Sarah Riley Howard posted, the attorney, I don't know how they logically can think that the way they've operated is going to result in of them winning and her being removed.
So the situation, they're basically saying she lied and she was fear mongering. Okay, she caused unnecessary fear and panic among the residents of Ottawa County by going public. Because Joe Moss went public with the $2.5 million thing, and why that was a good idea and why the health department needed to do that. So then she went public with, okay, this is what's going to happen. If everything sticks at this $2.5 million, we knew that we had to cut down to just 8 programs, because there are 8 that we are required by law. Like a health department cannot exist unless it operates all 8 of those programs. So we knew all the lovely, wonderful things that had been developed by the community in partnership with the health department over decades and decades and decades would be gone. And we would have 8 things left. And let's see, I'm trying to think. 3 or 4 of them could charge a fee, but the others were not fee-based. So the ones we could operate, the non-fee-based ones, for 4 weeks with that amount of money that we had, that $550,000 to $650,000. And the other ones that could charge fees, if we tripled the fees, we could continue those throughout the remainder of the year based on fees only, operating completely on fees, charged to restaurants, charged to homeowners, charged to real estate agents, all the different things. And when we grasped that, like we ran these calculations, what can we do with this money that is legal? We understood that to be a threat to the public. Like, this is a threat to their health. Their health department is going to shut down either completely in 4 weeks, or if it doubles or triples fees, it can keep going with a few things, which would be water and food and waste.
That's not fear mongering. That's literally stating what would happen if your budget was cut to $2.5 million.
Yes. I was honestly fearful for my community, right? I mean, fearful for the economics of our community. There's, potentially, if we didn't triple those fees, and the board would have to approve that fee increase, which was not likely, there would not be a restaurant inspected starting in November. So who's going to go to those restaurants? And who wants to be that restaurant owner who doesn't have the safety of knowing I've got a partner that I can call on at the health department who will help me out, answer my questions, and make sure we're doing this right? It would have been just disastrous. So
I can see some people though who have those thoughts that think on that level where they would be like, so my restaurant doesn't get inspected. So what? That's just regulation, right? So we don't need that sort of thing. But until you go and you have food poisoning.
And that's why there's laws around those services, because they're not sexy, right? I mean, they're not cute and fuzzy. Like, it's not moms and babies, it's just like, who wants to pay extra money when you're trying to start up a new business? And who wants to have your kitchen that you need to build in that business inspected by this person who says, no, you can't do it that way. You have to spend more money.
I think history is, and history has proven we need it.
Yes, these are laws because people will get sick and die without their knowledge or consent. Again, it's when things can happen, like you have damage to your air, damage to your water, damage to your food, damage to you because you contracted a disease you didn't give consent for. All those things, we can prevent those largely on a population level if we put certain things in place. Not entirely, but we can do a really good job.
We can mitigate.
Yeah, we can mitigate that to a very large degree, especially the more expert your team is and the better staffed you are. If it's staffed at minimal levels, then, that expertise is not going to be as good. You're not going to get the best people, and you're not going to be able to respond to outbreaks and notices. You won't pick them up as quickly.
It's speculation on my end, but considering how they operate, I think that's the goal. I think that's their goal. That is their ultimate goal, to completely eliminate regulation and go rogue.
And that's the goal.
That is like the epitome of individualism and individual freedom, right? I mean,
it is.
Who you want with no consequence.
Exactly. And so
they want to remove her because she's doing her job.
Right.
She's standing up for the community, which is also part of doing her job. She's being honest about what a $4.2 million budget cut would cost the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so they want her removed because she's speaking the truth. So do they want a gag order on her? Do they want her to not speak to the public completely?
Yeah, so they did issue in May another thing that you would find on pinskysmith.com through the communications manager for county administration, a notice that going forward, any communication to the public needed to be submitted there first and reviewed at least 24 hours ahead. And if it was going to be an interview with a reporter, then there needed to be a list of questions and the answers submitted for approval. So again, this is the difference between understanding the law and getting in just doing what you want, because you want to control the narrative. So it was evident that they wanted to control the narrative. This came out right after we did a press release on winning a national award for our emergency response planning, and then a state award for expertise and policy that helps the health of the community, right? So that did not fit the narrative that they wanted for the health department. That showed expertise and professionalism. And the next day, I think it was that next day or a couple of days later, that we got that email. That email did not go to all departments, though. It did not go to the sheriff, to the clerk, to the treasurer, people like that, the courts, the prosecutor. It did go to fiscal services, to human resources, to the parks department, etc. And it went to us. And we understand that it is the health officer's duty and responsibility to communicate with the public any threats to their health so that they can take measures to mitigate those, whatever they can do, and to advise them on what those steps would be, right? And so she did that with a budget, and she needs to do that. If there's an emergency, she needs immediate access to communication methods. Yeah, so putting out a press release directly, interviewing immediately with reporters, putting out social media posts on Facebook and Twitter or X. And so she sent a response and said, I notice you didn't include these other departments because you believe that they have oversight over the administration and operation of their departments, like the sheriff over the sheriff's department. And you may not be aware that I have that same authority and oversight by state law over this department. So they got an explanation. They didn't respond, except that they continued to send those emails. And then when the budget came around and she put out that notice to the public, like, you need to be aware that this is the discussion. Despite warnings, they doubled down on this amount and said, get as close as you can to $2.5 million. And this would be the outcome if there is no change of mind. And then another one was put out too. So we went right after Joe Moss issued his public release about why this was a smart move. We then issued ours and followed up with another one as we had continuing discussions 2 days later. And then they cut off our access to our newsletter software, basically, that we send out bulletins and media releases with, and our access to our Facebook account and Twitter accounts, and put out a release on our Facebook account. So they used it to state what they were not happy about. And we contacted the public and the media to say, just so you're aware, we don't have access to those anymore. That is not us. Anything you see on there is not coming from us.
I did not know this.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Drama, huh? I mean,
that infuriates me more than anything.
So, I mean, it just proved, like when we said back in May, they're trying to control the narrative, and that's not legal. Like transparency is what is necessary here. We are committed to being transparent.
Yeah, this is like the highest form of corruption. This is truly, they're the anti-government. Mm-hmm. And they're upset because government controls certain things within society, or has the laws control certain things within society. Mm-hmm. But they are operating in the short 9 months that they have been in office, 10 months now that they have been in office. At the level of corruption here to me is mind-boggling. I mean, I knew this was bad, but I didn't. I mean, these little nuances I had no idea about. This is unreal. Today you had the court case today, the appeal today. What happened there? Was it eventful? Is it still ongoing? Is it finished today? What is
it? That is finished today. So what happened was Adeline and her counsel, she has her own counsel, unfortunately. She should be represented and be held harmless through the county, but that's not an option because they picked their people who believe what they believe. And so obviously, they don't believe she should be the health officer, so that's a problem. So she has her own counsel that secured herself. And on February 13, she filed a lawsuit as things began to escalate from January 3, and it became apparent that they were trying to remove her and were interfering with her duties as health officer. She filed a lawsuit in state court, circuit court, basically. Then that was heard in March, at the end of March, March 31, and that judge ruled in her favor, stating that it was clearly evident that she was the rightfully appointed and approved, state-approved health officer of Ottawa County and could not be removed or demoted or any other thing without cause. And then that judge also put an injunction in place to prevent them from being able to remove her until a full trial with evidence and witnesses, et cetera, could be conducted. They filed an appeal saying that they believe that Judge Jenny McNeil, who is a new judge, but did a good job of understanding public health law and public health code in Michigan. So I believe she judged rightly, but they argued with her saying that Adeline is the health officer. And they also argued with the injunction preventing them from being able to remove her if they wanted to. And they basically said they're the commissioners, they should be able to put in who they want, as if it's like a cabinet or the court of a king or something. So that appeal was initially vacated, like, no, we're going to refuse this appeal. But then the appeals court decided that they would hear arguments about is she or is she not the rightful health officer, and is it proper to have a restraining order, an injunction from removing her from her position until the trial could conclude with evidence and witnesses. So that stopped all of the trial work around interfering with her duties and all of those things as things continued to happen, like the communications cut off and all that kind of stuff, budget interference, lots of things continued to happen because there was this appeal. And that had to be resolved first. That was today. This hearing was today with a randomly selected 3-judge panel. And arguments were heard. It took about an hour. It was live streamed on YouTube from the Michigan Court of Appeals, so people can probably find that, or you could link to that in your podcast notes. Obviously we don't know what they will do. They did give assurance that they would issue their findings very soon. They are aware of this hearing that Joe Moss initiated, and we talked about there's legal problems with that, but we didn't get into it, you and I. But they were aware that it was scheduled for October 19 and then had been moved to the 23rd. So they knew that was coming up soon. I think they understand that there's a time-sensitive issue here, so they need to issue their findings. So I think that will come soon. I hope that they recognize her as the other judge did, the trial judge did, as the properly and lawfully and procedurally appointed and approved health officer.
And then it'll stop other counties from trying to do the same thing.
The same thing,
So
yes.
Maybe that's why they allowed, I'm making an assumption here, clearly, and I'm not an attorney. Maybe that's why they allowed the case to move forward.
It is something I've wondered about as well.
Yeah, because they just had another, was it Brinley? I'm going to say this wrong. I don't have it in front of me. It was another county in April that voted to become a constitutional county, and they actually voted it down 4-1. I'll put that link in the show notes as well. I think it was Brinley or something like that, because Livingston County did it before Ottawa did.
Yes.
And then this third one attempted to do it, and they voted it down 4-1. Thank goodness. And then this will help. Hopefully the Court of Appeals will judge rightfully, and maybe my fingers are crossed that that's why they moved forward with this, so they could set it as law. And no, you are not going to oust the county health department because you don't like them or you don't feel like you want to spend money on public health.
Right. And so we also hope that they recognize the need for an injunction based on all of the things that have been developing since February when she first, filed a lawsuit against them, because if she is removed from her seat, there is no settlement or judgment that can remedy what could happen in our community by removing her, or what could happen to other communities by setting such a precedent. And so, one thing that people aren't really aware of is in the United States, as far as we're aware, we've had many, many attorneys combing through laws. There's no case precedent around this anywhere, not in Michigan, not in the United States. This is the first time that this has happened. A lot of health officers were removed during COVID-19. A lot of them retired. A lot of them found other jobs because of the threats and the hate and, of a segment of the population that they were serving. Many of them had kind of court situations, but none of them went through because they settled out of court, or they just left and did their thing. So no one did this. This has never, ever happened, that a health officer and the local governing entity are in a lawsuit over whether that person actually is a health officer and they can do their duties. So we are setting case precedent for the very first time. Ottawa County, it's not little, but kind of little Ottawa County, cute little place on the shores of Lake Michigan, hold up your hand and tell you where you live, is now in the national limelight because how this turns out is going to be used.
With huge implications.
In the
future.
It has huge implications. And so it's this huge responsibility on top of all the other difficulty. And I feel like we're soldiers who said, after the heat of the battle calmed down, we're going to give you leave to go home and visit your family and get to know everybody again and go on, have some time off. like that was promised and then it never happened. So here we went through COVID and now we're going through this, and everybody's just pretty worn out and weary. But it's clear that the little burning coal landed in our lap, and we can either let it burn through and ruin everything, or we can try to put it out. And so this is our job now, is to handle this well. And God bless the media. I mean, they found out about this and they have not stopped in covering it.
Yeah.
And so thank you, Tamara. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed with this appeals.
Yeah, so once they issue their findings based on what those are, then we can go back to the trial court.
You think they will try to continue to get her removed?
Yes, I do.
If the appeals court comes, you do.
They clearly stated so this morning, that they will do this no matter what. They clearly stated it when they issued it, the notice. So
what would you say? This is a question that's purely speculation on your part as well. What would you say the number of people in your county who support this commission? I know that when they had the hearing to appoint themselves a constitutional county, they ignored the 100+ people who were there against it. I think everybody was against it that was there that night, right?
It was. Yeah. There was only maybe, I don't know, a handful, 5, 6.
It's a minority that supports it. It's a minority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a large number of people who came out right after we did that mask order in 2021 in August, right as school was starting. A lot of people, a lot of anger, and that had a lot of momentum into 22. So there was an angry. So anger is very motivating, right? A lot more motivating than most other emotions.
Yeah, and it's anti-government rhetoric too,
right.
So that with the fear and the anti-government rhetoric, it's a perfect mix right there for.
And so they ran on things like that. You need to ask, how do you define that in order to really know? So parental rights, freedom, the Constitution, like things that really people don't disagree about mostly unless you ask. So you need to know the words, and you need to say, what do you mean by that? And what do you mean by that? Tell me more. Like, what do you mean by Marxist when you say that the health department is Marxist? I don't fully understand. So in Ottawa County is deeply red, deeply red. I mean, we haven't voted for a Democrat as president since 1864. And Democrats were not the same Democrats, and Republicans were not the same Republicans. Their parties have changed platforms since then. So they had a brilliant strategy in that election strategy. It was a mid-year election. There's no president. So there's you don't have to pick which one you
lower
want.
Voter
it
turnout.
was 30 to 34% of voters turned out.
Oh my gosh. We need to really change that. We really do. That is where we need to really start showing up and getting people registered to vote and getting people to the polls, because
and then Democrats didn't show up. I mean, there were only 4 of 11. They don't even run in Ottawa County because it seems hopeless, right?
Yeah. But isn't Zylstra, Doug Zylstra, he's a Democrat, right?
He is. We have one amazing Democrat. My son-in-law lives in his district. He said, that is the first Democrat I've ever voted for in my life, and he's amazing. He is doing such a good job. So he's great. I mean, when you're talking local politics, Democrat and Republican labels really don't mean anything, because their platforms are national issues. Their platforms are not, what do we do with the road? What do we do with the restaurant? What do we do with the park? Do we want a park? Don't want a park? Are we going to build a new building for the courtroom or get a court? So, it's kind of silly. If they care and they want the common good and they're willing to be transparent, govern well, be fiscally responsible, they're qualified, right? I mean, and if they believe that every single person belongs and deserves that representation.
That's the thing too, with changing the motto the way they did as well. I just think it's a slap in the face to so many people. We put the logo "Still Where You Belong" in the story for October.
So, that local
'Cause
change hurt my family a lot.
it's your community. It's your
Yes.
community. It belongs to everyone. It doesn't just belong to the commissioners or the people who think like they do.
Right.
You know, every community is like that. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it's your community, regardless of what your political
Mhm.
affiliation is. Like you said, you have a responsibility and an obligation as leaders in your community to take care of everyone. And I know that's a socialist thought, right? To community itself is a socialist, quote unquote, socialist thought,
Right,
a
being
Marxist
social.
thought. Yeah, but that's what it is. You have to care about your community, and what you said is important, is like the definition of things, because the projection and the deflection on what these are, it's deliberate. They're
It's
deliberately
deliberate.
spinning it.
It's intentionally using words that people can construe in another way that sounds legitimate, but it's not. And so, and that's very, again, for people who are God, God, Jesus, Jesus, pray, pray, pray through their whole thing, and then being, then lying, basically. Okay, we're gonna deception and lie, I feel like, are about the same thing, but they're deceiving people as a practice. And it's harmful, it's hurtful, it's abusive, it's spiritually abusive to people who have that faith. It's just, it others people who are not the same. And so, my family, my husband's a black man who was an immigrant and refugee from Africa when he came here. We have children who are biracial. I have a disabled child. I have a transgender child. I mean, my husband would say that Ottawa County saved his life by bringing him here and putting him through school. He went to college here because of the generosity of people in some churches and things like that. He was a Muslim. I mean, he all the things that Ottawa County says it's not, right? But they loved him and gave him a place. He does not feel like that now. And our children and I mean, these are my family. I love my family, like every other mother and father loves their family, and wife and husband love their spouse, and the people we love, we love. And we don't feel safe here. I don't feel like I belong here anymore. In the way that I did before, where I felt, and this was a wonderful community, very conservative, but they cared about each other and they worked together. Like the churches would work with the nonprofits, which would work with the government, with the businesses, to improve conditions for people, to improve lives, and acknowledge that people need help. We all need help sometimes, and some of us will always need help, and we're willing to be there for that. That was the kind of community that we were, and that just broke.
That's a
With
powerful statement right there, Marcia. It really is. That's a powerful statement. I think that summarizes everything that you all are going through, and the damage that's been done already, and it's been 10 months, so most of them are not up for election for another year, right?
right, and it's a 4-year term next time instead of a
Oh
2-year
my
term.
goodness. Please, Ottawa County. Please, we need to get people registered to vote
Mhm.
and to show up. To
Yeah.
show up at the polls. Well, the positive of next year is that it's also a presidential election year.
Mhm.
So hopefully that helps to motivate people to come out as well and get people registered. But so we need to wait until this panel of judges comes back and
Yeah.
says what they say, and how things move forward from there is really determined
Yeah.
on that.
So hopefully they will issue a finding next week. And then let's see, they rescheduled the hearing to remove Health Officer Hambley. It was the 19th. They moved it to the 23rd, and there's a conflict with her counsel. So it may be somewhere around the 26th of October. So we have from now until then for things to be done. There are always many opportunities, many strategies that one can put in place, but based on that finding, that will inform, what can be done. Is there a way to prevent that hearing or not? The outcomes of that, they did submit Nathaniel Kelly's papers to the state on the day after they filed the notice for that hearing. So despite appointing them in January, they never put anything in. So it feels as if they believe it's a foregone conclusion that she will be gone because they've submitted his papers for approval to the state. So that smacks of a lack of transparency, that smacks of violations in spirit, if not letter, of the Open Meetings Act, where things are done publicly.
That right there. We already know this. We already know that things go on behind closed doors with that group. We already know this.
Yeah.
It always has.
Yes,
So
it always has.
The Open Meetings Act is continuously violated by them. I'm curious as to what the public can do against this board of commissioners who is not following the letter of the law. That really is a question that I have.
Well, right now there's a recall going on. There's only a couple more weeks for gathering signatures.
I didn't know that. I didn't know there was a recall going on.
For one member who had the lowest number of votes.
I did read that. It was the woman. What's
Commissioner
her name?
Lucy Ebel. Yeah, so if people live in District 2 and they want to do something about that, they can, oh gosh, I'm trying to think. I should have this on my mind, a way to connect with that, but it's not hard to find an opportunity to sign a petition. A recall doesn't remove someone, doesn't remove a commissioner. It just, they have to go through an election again. So they go back up for election in the spring with another person running so that voters can actually turn out in mass and vote. They did not do that in that district. So that would take, if it was successful, that would break up that majority a little bit. If it's not successful, it won't. But if it is successful, so even if you don't live in that district, you can volunteer to help, or you can contribute and give to them for all the costs that they're incurring. It's just people in that district doing it. It's just residents,
Absolutely. Well, we'll put links to all of this information in the show notes. I'll get all of the links for all of this, and we'll include it for people who want to get involved.
People can talk to people like you, right? They can put in comments to their local paper about what they think. They can go to these meetings and write their commissioner and say, I like this, I don't like that. Please represent me. And, so there's a lot of things we can do, but it's really contentious, and people are really aggressive, are seen more empowered since COVID-19 and the recent presidential candidates that we've had, or people who've been president, to be not as kind to one another. And so people are scared, I think, to step out. And if they're business people or churches, they're scared to take a stance because they may alienate some of their customers or their members, or their employees.
Right. I think people really need to do is pause. They need to pause and really think about the ramifications of actions like this. We live in a country, we live in towns, communities, cities, a state, a country. We are not an island.
Right.
We are not by ourselves. We are a community, whether you like it or not, whether you like being a part of a community or not. We are a community, and there are responsibilities that come with that. We cannot just do what we feel we want to do as an individual if we're going to bring harm to people. You want to talk about Constitution? Your rights end when you harm another person. Right. And harming someone with a communicable disease, you're violating someone else's rights. You have your right, yes, but when your right harms someone else, that's when it stops. That's when you have to really stop and say, my responsibility is this. And if I refuse to get vaccinated, which, millions did, if I refuse to wear a mask, it is my responsibility to not put myself in public where I could harm someone else.
Yeah, put yourself in a bubble.
Yeah, it really is that simple. Mm-hmm. Well, that violates my rights. No, it doesn't violate your rights because you have something that could kill someone. So it really comes down to that. And I really just feel like society isn't thinking beyond their own nose lately, where it's all about me, not the community, not the people around you. And when someone and a group of people are acting like this, where they are not following the rule of law, the party that is the law, the law party, we're all about laws, is blatantly not following the rule of law. And it's harming the community as a whole.
Yeah.
And it's a minority of people who are doing this. It isn't the majority of people. The majority of people are not for this. Whether or not that county is red or not, I don't care if that county is bright red. A majority of people do not support this. That is already the community is already showing that.
The community is showing that. I mean, every single day. So if there's a silver lining in this, Ottawa Impact, these Republican commissioners, have been the best PR firm we have ever had.
That's what I'm saying. Like they kind of make the job easy, hard, difficult, and easy at the same time.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
really is. Like, we can't make this up. You can't make this up.
Right. And, when public health is done well, you don't know we're there. Like nothing happens. Nothing happens is hard to sell. How do you prove nothing happened? 12 children did not die today because, we did our job.
And it's so true. That is such a good point. It's not sensationalized. And
Nothing, no.
that's what everybody responds to these days is sensationalism.
Right.
So
I spent my entire career trying to figure out how to get people to connect to their health department and understand what we do. And they did it for me, like in 9 months.
Yeah.
They know the name of the health officer, doggone it. Like nobody ever knew that.
Nobody knew it before, right? Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
So, they've done other wonderful things too. There's people, we get like cards and cupcakes and cookies and lunches on a regular basis from our community. They did a rally with hundreds of adults in front and then millions of honking horns because it was rush hour, as they were saying, public health, is health for all of us, right?
It gives me hope. It gives me hope for humanity. Yeah. It truly does.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to keep up on this. Hopefully this decision comes back the right one. Gosh, it has to. It has to.
Yeah, we've got many decisions. I would not be surprised if this ends up coming before the Michigan Supreme Court and them deciding if they're going to hear it or not, because it is so pivotal. And like you said, people will watch and copy what is going on, and if it continues in this way, and these Republicans of this ilk are successful, there are other people ready to do the same thing all around. Or we will clearly establish for the next 100 years the proper duties of the health department and where their local governing entity, and they stop and start, right? Who has authority over what? And if we're not successful, we go back 100 years,
Yeah, it's just hard for me to fathom that 11 people, 10 people really get to control everything about every aspect of a county or area. The president of the United States has limitations. We have checks and balances in place for a reason. So
yes.
At the state level, it has to be there as well, because
it is. Yeah.
If we allow them to go rogue, they're going to go rogue. It's going to happen. And
the state is watching, absolutely informed. We keep them closely informed. They know what's going on. I think they watch every meeting, I would assume, so.
The one question we didn't go back and address, and I'm really curious about this. Why is the state of Michigan not supporting her? Why did they not pay for an attorney for her?
Maybe they will in the end. So they how do I say this? So they are supporting in many ways. They're supporting our health department in all the ways they always have supported our health department. This situation is unique for sure, and it is not lost on me, and probably not on others, that this small subset of commissioners in our county would love also to put a black mark on the administration of the state of Michigan.
Oh, for sure. That's
so if they could take on the health department and the health officer, and also disrupt the law, the public health code, and the governor and the state health department, they would do so. So it's delicate, it's political, obviously, right? And so, I'm factoring that in. I'm factoring in that we're all humans. The state, though, and the governor have the same responsibilities that I do and the health officer of Ottawa County do, right? We are public servants. We serve for the welfare of the people in our jurisdiction. And there is an obligation that comes with that job. And so Governor Whitmer or Director Hertel at Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, they should be weighted by the same weight that Adeline Hambley has on her shoulders, that they are there to leave this state and this little county as good or better than they found it, and not look only right to their own vested or self-interest, right? I understand that it's necessary for everyone to have a job. All those things are super important, like very, 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 very important. But they have that duty. So I believe that they are considering that. But there's also this difficult balance of acting too soon. So, like, you can't always step in to prevent something unless you actually know it's going to happen. And sometimes you don't really know that until it happens. So sometimes you have to wait until a harm is done. So we have seen several, many harms done in the last 9 to 10 months. But around the health department, it was basically demoting Adeline Hambley in this budget situation, right? And they were closely involved with all of that. And now there's this notice of it. So just as we're passing the last budget, we get this removal notice for a special meeting and a hearing of the commissioners. So now that's in play, and that's got a short timeline. And there's communication. I mean, the state is aware that they're watching these meetings, like I said earlier.
I'm really thinking that this is being done the way that it's done on purpose. The more that I think about it, the more logical it is that they are letting this go through to set a precedent that you are not going to mess with this. That is my hope. And that is what I'm going to move forward believing.
And who should handle this? The courts? The courts or the state? Is it the heavy hand of government or the biased or unbiased? I mean, they're gonna play this. It's going to get twisted, the narrative, whatever way we go. So hopefully the state needs to demonstrate that it has powers and uses them as it needs to. So hopefully they will be able to do that. And the courts will also weigh in as following the rule of law and judging fairly according to the laws of the state of Michigan. So I hope both are involved. But, we are just walking down this road day by day. And I'm going to trust that people understand when the trigger arrives, when they need to act.
I am too. So, it's kind of like reminiscent of the DOJ the past few years. You have to let them do their job, and their job is not easy in this respect. It's kind of the same. It's in the same waters anyway.
Yes.
Well, I thank you so much. We're going to keep an eye on what happens here, and hopefully it's positive news. I'm going to link all the information in the show notes as much as we can. Let's work to get people registered and showing up to vote next year. Not 34%. Let's get 94%. Things change when the numbers go higher.
Vote in the Republican primary. That is the show in Ottawa County. And you don't have to be a Republican.
That's even better news. But even if you are a Republican, come on.
We have open primaries in Michigan.
This is not a Republican commission. This is not Republican.
No. Vote for the best person and make sure the best Republican is going to be there in November and the best Democrat. But here in Ottawa County, you got to pay attention to the Republican primary. And so you're going to have to think about that. So everybody needs to think about that and show up. Don't wait for November.
Yeah, and we really need to get more people running for local office, because that's really a reason why a lot of these far right, ultra right conservatives are being elected to local school boards, to local commissions, because people were so apathetic and nobody wanted to run, and nobody goes to the meetings every week or month or whenever they are. Nobody gets involved in local politics, and this is proof positive of how important it is and where it starts. It all starts at the local level. Every bit of this, every bit of politics is life, as I say. There is no aspect of our life that is not affected by politics. So people need to participate. It is critical to participate in every election, in your city government. Hold people accountable.
And we
It's as
have
simple
that
as that.
opportunity. Yeah, we get to participate in this country.
It's a privilege.
Yeah.
There are many around the world who cannot, and we take it
Yes.
for granted so
We do.
much.
And I did, honestly. I mean, I don't want to preach at people because I did the same thing. It always worked. It worked just fine in Ottawa County. It was always fine.
Until it
Why
wasn't.
bother my head with that? I didn't need to, until it stopped. And doggone it, So forever after, I've learned something that's going to make a difference. And I'm sorry, everybody, that it took me this long to learn that. So
Well, you're
so
not
don't
alone.
make it
You're in
too
good company, but now it's like, okay, everybody's forgiven. Let's move forward type of thing.
Yeah.
Let's go forward in a positive direction with true democracy, with true freedom, where everybody has freedom,
Yes.
with the responsibility of the fact that you live in a community.
Right. And I respect democracy. I mean, we have a representative government, which means sometimes they're going to represent me and sometimes they're not. But we keep voting, right? And that's okay. That's okay. And so I respect that they got voted in.
Yeah, and it's a matter of holding them accountable too, because when you're
Mhm.
elected official, you don't get to go rogue and do whatever you feel and disregard your constituents, which clearly many of these commissioners are doing. The public
they're not
hearing proved
listening.
that. They proved it, so, but that, unfortunately, I think it's the shakeup that we needed, and hopefully people are shook like you, and we kind of move forward now in a more positive direction. A lot more self-awareness of what's going on, around us and what's happening in our communities for sure. Marcia, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. We will keep in touch because, regardless of what happens, this isn't over. So
Thank you, Tamara.
we will
Thank
definitely
you.
keep in touch. We recorded this podcast on the evening of October 11th. On Thursday, October 12th, the 3-judge panel from the Michigan Court of Appeals, including Michelle M. Rick, Christopher P. Yates, and Douglas B. Shapiro, determined that Adeline Hambley was indeed properly appointed to the position of Ottawa County Health Officer in December of 22. They further stated that the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners' statutory authority to remove Hambley if she, quote, proves to be incompetent or guilty of official misconduct or habitual or willful neglect of duty as contemplated by MCL 46.11. End quote. As Deputy Health Officer Mansoray stated in this podcast, and of which we also know, Health Officer Hambley is not guilty of any of the above. Sarah Riley Howard, Health Officer Hambley's attorney, was quoted as stating, "We are obviously extremely pleased that the panel agreed with us and with the trial court that Health Officer Hambley is the lawful health officer and has been since December, and therefore their demotion of her was illegal and contrary to statute." David Coleman, who is the attorney for the Ottawa County Commissioners, disagreed with the court's decision to affirm Hambley's position as the duly appointed, not interim, health officer, because of course he did. Coleman said that the county plans to appeal to the Michigan Supreme Court, and the only reason for doing so is because this could have the potential to further delay any potential trial and Hambley's hopes of getting a now vacated court order revived that protected her from the termination without cause. Because we know that a hearing is set for the 24th of October where Health Officer Hambley is still facing a termination brought forth by Ottawa County Board of Commissioners after Chairman Joe Moss claimed in his initial hearing filing that she demonstrated incompetence during the county budget process earlier this year. Moss claimed that Hambley caused panic in the community because she was honest with how a $4.2 million budget cut would affect the community, I might add, that she lied about the budget and budget process and she failed to cooperate with this process. Isn't that laughable? It's laughable if it weren't so utterly irresponsible. In fact, the only side demonstrating incompetence during the county budget process are Joe Moss and his ilk who don't understand the law and operate as if they are above it. In expectation of this happening, Sarah Riley Howard also released 500 pages of emails to the public from the weeks and months leading up to the latest attempt to remove Health Officer Hambley from her post. The link to this document is in our show notes. Read up on it. It's very interesting. Coleman has asserted that the hearing would give Health Officer Hambley a fair chance to state her case for commissioner's consideration. Again, laughable. The commission has proven since day one, January 3rd, 2023, when they had Nathaniel Kelly dressed in a suit with speech in hand, that their goal is to control the county health department and oust Hambley and anyone else who gets in their way. This is not how democracy works, folks. Michigan, let's come together and show Ottawa County, Livingston County, and any other county that believes they are above the law and want to operate as kings and queens of this land what true democracy looks like. Make no mistake, these far-right actors are the minority, and it's about time the majority holds them accountable. Do you love our podcast and online content? Then you'll love our monthly print magazine plus 5 bonus magazines even more. Subscribe Plus 5 offers amazing adventures, stunning photography, and high-profile content you won't find in our free online magazine. Plus, you receive automatic entry into our monthly Spend Local Michigan and surprise pop-up giveaways where you have a chance to win a monthly Made in Michigan goodie box and other awesome prizes like GoPros, kayaks, outdoor gear, and more. Subscribe Plus 5 today at livelovelocalmi.com.